I always find it funny that I hit the table and the table just goes da 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 da. But let's see if I can add a guest. Okay, invite BladetheXolo. Sholo. There we go. Good evening, Freckles. Hey, Chell. Hey, Rural. Tonight's going to be a very special episode. Hopefully we'll be joined in a moment. There we are.
Go live.
Go live. Hit the camera button. It's okay.
I thought I pressed the camera. You know what? I totally am.
It's okay. Take your time. Oh, there we are.
Is it me? Okay.
It is you. Good evening.
Hi.
How's it going?
Oh, good.
We're going to be, as anybody on my lives will tell you, this is going to be extremely casual and at times silly, but that's okay.
Okay, cool.
So, for anybody who didn't catch my video earlier in the week, we're going to be doing a very special episode of Werewolf Wednesday, wherein we're going to be taking some time out, our first hour, in fact, to talk to BladetheXolo about her upcoming book, Nightskins Tall Tales of a Black American Princess. I'm excited to have you here. Thank you for taking some time out and visiting with us, because from the very first post you made about this book, I was intrigued and excited to see what you were going to do. So could you take maybe a moment and just explain to our viewers what the book's about?
Okay, well, thank you for the wonderful introduction. I too have been excited about this. And so the book is about Black women's rage as they turn into werewolves and eat people. That's the pitch. That's the log line that I did not expect to go viral, at all.
It perked up a lot of ears. I remember you because my introduction to you was that pitch line, followed by me clicking over to your page and seeing you asking about violence in schools and werewolves in high schools. And I was just like, oh, this is a lot like the way that I write. I feel as though I found a kindred spirit. Because so we've written a book. I know a lot of people are going to ask the question, and I'm going to make sure that I say this a couple of times throughout, because there's no way of me posting it. But Blade has a link tree available. It's if you go on her page, it's easy. It's linktr.ee/BladetheXolo, XOLO. And you can also go and see it on her TikTok, which is at BladetheXolo. She's got the book in the hands of an editor. She's looking at raising a little bit of money when it comes to getting the editing done. So if you guys can stop on over and help out in any way, shape, or form, that'd be fantastic. Because I want to read this. I have librarian friends and members of my Discord, all who are like, does she have an ISDN for it yet? Can we order it for the library system yet? Does it I'm assuming we're not there yet.
So what's the phrase? Man makes plans and God laughs. That's it's where I'm living right now. Is I'm in the technical back end fiddly bits where I have the pre-order all set except for one vital thing that they're like, it's gonna take another 9 days, and you're like, cool. That's fine. I was trying to time it so that I could have it ready for today, and it just didn't work. Like, my big plan was to do my cover reveal, which I made the cover and I'm really excited about. You can see hints of it on my link tree, and I made all kinds of fun little things, and then I realized that I was not focusing on the actual fiddly parts of a self-published thing. It don't happen unless you actually get things done. So it's been I appreciate everybody's patience, because I am also excited about getting this out. And I'm very passionate about it. I was also very frustrated by there was a publisher. The reason why I posted that one that went viral anyway
Mm-hmm.
was because I'd gone to a publisher's website and it had a list of don't send me anything about werewolves, witches, vampires, ghosts, demons. You know, it was a whole list, and I'm like, okay, that's fine.
You've taken away all the fun stuff.
I mean, I've written another big epic that was this huge novel, and I actually took a break 2 years ago because I worked a haunted house, and I had a friend who was like, she turns her house for to raise money and turns it into a haunted house, and that year she's like, anybody want to be a witch as a volunteer? And I'm like, me, 1000%, me. And I get there, and she's like, okay, so what's your character's line? What is she wearing? What's her motivation? Here's your blocking. Here's a team of people you're in charge of. You are going to be the final boss of the whole thing. You're going to have these little ringers that you get to, like these high schoolers that you get to grab through a trap door. You get to curse this person's soul. You get to use all of your theater major background. Or I was literally going, I will curse you. Don't forget this day. She has betrayed her coven. Remember this. And people flipped out. Like, there were people, like, there was a bunch of little girls that came back and they're like, we'd like to join your coven. I was like, wait. And then, like, a guy who was dressed as Baphomet was like, my queen. I'm like, cool. And a guy dressed as Harry Potter was like throwing his wand around. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm putting a spell on you. And I was like, you'll have to do better than that. Thanks for playing. And you just, with the weirdest one were the little kids. Because the little kids kept trying to rescue the girl who was fake tied up. So on the fly, I had to invent a like extra thing to keep the 7-year-olds from storming through everybody, grabbing this girl off the pillar and pulling her to the exit. And like this little 3-year-old dressed as a fairy is going, that's not nice. This is very bad. So I had to be like, okay, so I'm like, if you grab this person that I've grabbed and run, that you break the spell and you can save them. And there was one of the high schoolers could pop his shoulders, and if I grabbed him by like one and said, your soul is mine, he'd scream and pop his shoulders and people would freak. And I watched a couple, like the boyfriend tossed his girlfriend at me, said, take her instead. She's like, what? It was just like,
good to know chivalry's not dead.
I mean, no, my favorite was this like 400-pound, 7-foot guy, this huge like Viking of a guy who you walk through the trap door and you smile and you got this top hat and you're like, hey, I could make beautiful things from your soul. And people are like, and he says, well, take her. And this like tiny girl right behind him who just happened to be one of the ringers. And so I was like, I will, and grabbed her and pulled her through the top door. She's screaming. He's like, wait, I didn't mean it. It was so much fun. And I came back with laryngitis, because it was, a random cold, rainy day, and I was dressed appropriately, but nobody else was. Yeah. So, like, after 2 days of that, I came home, was sick on the couch, and I just had this, like, buzzing. Like, I had worked on this thing. I was like, I've got to write something. I'm going to write about witches. And I thought, okay, if you're a black witch and you are 100 years old, 200 years old, 300 years old, you are not going to be cuddly. You're going to be very powerful, very pissed off, and you're going to have no time for nothing because you have literally lived through Civil War, civil rights, Jim Crow, being a black woman in America in every way, shape, and form. And so if you're around today, all these people are being like, yay, tarot. And you have literally lived through the Salem witch trials. You have no time. And so one of the big bosses in my story is Tituba, the OG Salem witch trials. First person to ever be tried as a witch was a black woman named Tituba. And the interesting thing was she's originally from what is now Colombia. And in my story, it follows this family. The main character, her family has been dynastically wealthy. So wealthy for 400 years. Oh my goodness. And they got their money from gold, not slavery, none of that. They got it from a gold mine. And the thing is, the gold is cursed because in the 1600s, when the gold dried up, they tried a bunch of local root women as for witchcraft, because when the backers in Europe were like, hey, where's the gold? They're like, oh, it couldn't possibly be because of slavery or like pulling all the vital things out of the jungle or pestilence. No. It's witchcraft. And you know what? These healers over here, the ones that are actually like helping the slaves not die, yet they're the problem.
Yep.
Like we got like it's so they tried these 4 women and this 1 man for witchcraft, and the guy gave up the women because he didn't want to be tortured.
Yeah.
He was like, it ain't me, it's not me. It's not
wow.
Me.
That's a little bit see, so you have the 7 foot tall, 400-pound guy who's like, take her, not me. And you're just like, wow, that seems to be the pattern that has occurred over history.
It happens. This is actually based upon a real thing. I didn't make this up. I was inspired. Yeah. It's called, the article is called Between, what is it? The Devil and the Inquisition. And if you Google it, you can find it. It's actually they have it as a free PDF, and you can read it. And it's just
I will make sure that the mods send me that link so that I can actually post it when it comes to interview notes. So that'll be good for people to check out. Thank you for referencing that.
I mean, I do a lot of research because I think that it's more important. Like, why werewolves? Why anything else? I mean, one, if you make stuff up, you're generally going to repeat yourself. Life is a lot crazier. If you can actually like do a deep dive, you can find out all kinds of crazy things and you can use it for your story. And I just, you know, I have always been fascinated with African-American folklore because I was raised on oral tradition. And a lot of my family in the past is white. Like my grandmother was one of 9. 6 of them passed as white because the 1920s were hard. Like, everyone's like, oh, you cowards. It's like, you know what? Go back in time. Hang out in America during the Depression and see if you're going to be, like, the first one to, like, judge anybody. Like, you got to survive. But but I came with a lot of pride that my family did not pass. They could have. Instead, my grandfather, so on my maternal side, that was, you know, she was one of 3 who didn't. On my paternal side, my grandfather was a civil rights activist who desegregated the city of Pittsburgh. Like, literally has a Freedom Corner named after him. So I grew up with civil rights activists, like, at dinner, going to see them. Tuskegee Airmen, like, and let me tell you, the scariest people are the Black feminists. And I mean that with the utmost respect, because
I would have to agree with the utmost respect, because of some of the rallies I've gone to and some of the meetings I've attended, I can confirm that wholeheartedly with respect. Yes, I agree.
Do you know why they're so hardcore?
I mean, I wouldn't want to speak to it in general. I mean, I feel like it's not the kind of thing. I mean, it's a combination of having to deal with, if from my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't it mostly be because even through the women's suffrage, it was kind of they were kind of pushed to the back of the suffrage movement, even it not being considered. So every step of the feminist movement has kind of given less space, even less space to those members of color, even when it was supposed to be a kind of a joint effort.
You are 100% correct, and you are like the only person who usually knows that. So, yay!
Apparently, I get gold stars.
Gold star. Also, though, to double on top of that, though, the same thing also happened during the civil rights movement. Because the expectation was the woman supports the man. So then, when the Black women are like, "Hey, what about us?" They're like, "Didn't we have 2 movements for you?" And they're like, "Actually, we supported both y'all." And so then when you had the feminist movement, the Black feminist movement, it happened after both. So suddenly they had 3 different hostile groups, because you had just populace in general. And then you had their own people turn against them because they called them ungrateful. And I was taught by these women, and they're highly educated, and this is their teaching style, and this is you, and this is how they'll teach you. And so you had better be able to stand up
Yeah.
And if they're like, that's the most racist thing, you have to be like, why? Instead of, oh my God. And that was, in college, you'd have I think a lot of times there is a reason for anger.
Yeah.
You have the idea about why werewolves versus vampires. Yes, vampires are fun, but I always thought the werewolves were having more fun. Instead of the beauty of death, and I don't sweat, and I will stand here for 100 years and resemble a statue.
Yeah.
Instead of running around in the woods, you got like one day of the month where you don't have your shit together, but who does?
Yeah.
You can go around and you're having fun.
I was gonna say one night out of 30 doesn't sound like that bad of a trade-off.
Right. And then if it's really bad, you can rip, like a guy grabs your butt, you can rip his face off. I wish that we could have such a thing. Go to a club. I mean, no, granted, I had a friend, father was a paratrooper.
Mm-hmm.
Meet her, everybody's meeting for Italian, she sits down, she's like, oh. I'm like, what's wrong? And she's like, there's this guy. I was like, okay. She's like, he just grabbed my arm. He's trying to make me have, drinks with him. And I said, no. And I was like, okay. But I also know my friend. So I was like, so what'd you do? She's like, so I broke his nose. And there was blood everywhere. And I got some on my dress. And so she was mad about the blood. Not about anything else.
I feel like one, I've been in that club situation where a guy then complains to the security and is like, but she hit me. And then you're like, because you grabbed her. And everybody applauds as that guy gets escorted out. And you're just like, yeah.
It wasn't even a club. She was walking down the street and he tried to pull her into the club.
Yeah.
And it don't work that way. But I was just like,
No.
And I mean, I think there's a book. I don't know. Have you guys read it? I have like so many books, but like it's Hood Feminism. Have you guys read this book? But it talks about I don't know if I can read this or
no. It's okay. It's okay. We'll also put that in the notes as well. Perfect.
Okay, I have a bunch of notes, but the thing about this one is that it talks about the women movement from a black woman's perspective, but what it doesn't talk about are good girls and how Black good girls are held at a very, very high level of expectation.
Yeah.
And they're often dismissed and they're not allowed to get mad. And you're supposed to just take it. You're supposed to take all of it and you are not allowed to ever lose your temper because if you lose your temper, that means that you are not a lady anymore. And so part of the reason, I guess I'm so excited to talk to you about this because my story is about a Black American princess who literally wants for nothing. She gets a castle when she's 7. She has more money than she ever knows what to do with. But everybody's trying to take it. Everybody's trying to marry her, have her, make her have her babies. Because they're like, what's the point of a castle if you don't have babies? You can have as many surrogates as you want. She's like, first of all, it's my castle. Second of all, I don't wanna. And they're like, well, what's the point? Like, we didn't work that hard on your education if you are not going to have a baby.
It somehow defaults into the patriarchy, like, even when it comes to these situations where it's like, yes, but you need to marry for the kingdom. And you're just like, come on now.
So it's not that simple. Because if you think about, so Black excellence, which is part of the story, is the fact that was the expectation that you were a monster and that the church was the only place where you could actually like dress respectably and be treated as a person. So that being the deaconess, being the usher, being part of the choir was how you were king or queen. And so the Talented 10th, which is this rather racist thing that Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois showed up of for every, if there's 10 Black people, 9 of them are going to be sharecroppers, hands-on laborers, but that one is going to be highly educated. And this was very, very divisive. But at the time, it was not meant to be. At the time, it was supposed to be empowering. And that's how you get the Harlem Renaissance. That's how you get, Black Wall Street. You have freedom by economic independence. And like, why did the Chelsea Massacre happen? Because Tulsa was independent and they were at making money. And that don't fly. And so, but I'm very tired of the narrative that, you know, Black people are victims instead of kings and queens in their own right, and that the pressure how do you make a diamond? An extreme amount of pressure coming from all sides turns raw material into a thing. She is a diamond because she's got all this pressure. And then that's just the background, because right next door is a vampire who wants to marry her. And nobody remembers that the crazy family next door are vampires except for her. So everything about her life and the way that she is just makes her a bigger target for monsters. And she has to have this castle because it's the only place that the vampires can't show up and just be in her bed. Because the villain of the story, her name is Katie McBride. And she is this crazy ex-girlfriend. She just is blonde, blue-eyed. Well, actually, her hair is champagne pink. And her family comes from a matrilineal vampires. And they have been in power, and they are really excited that for the first time in a long time, you have same-sex marriage. So the very day that same-sex marriage is legalized, finally, they don't need to worry about a guy. They can marry a girl. They can marry their daughter to a promising daughter, aka Jenna, the main character, who has 200 years on top of them because their family's been wealthy for 200 years. Jenna's family's been wealthy for 4. And so when it comes to, and the whole town is full of rich people. Everybody's got money. And so you have, this is the first in the series about this crazy town of, like, you know, pirates who kept their gold and who have a fight with the mermaids. And the mermaids who eat the drowned and are...
God, I need this book. Okay.
Sorry, my dog.
Oh, it's okay.
But, you know, the point about it is that honing in on just, she's the only one who can save her family. Like, the vampires glamour her family, and they arrange a marriage for her to get married to Katie.
Got it.
And she has to get everybody out, because the second the vampires get their money, they're going to eat her, take the family wealth. She's got a sister and 2 brothers. They're going to also end up being part of it. She has to save everybody, but she can't tell them why. They're like, oh, she's just the troubled girl. She's like, you remember how she ate the cat at my 7th birthday? They're like, she was very upset. And, you know...
Does no one remember the cat that got ate at the 7th birthday? Come on.
And so, yeah, it was really fun to just have a vampire princess versus a werewolf princess. And they're, like, frenemies. Because they have been fighting since that 7-year-old party. There's a photo that someone took of these 2 little girls dressed like princesses just trying to kill each other with this little kitten in between them. And they're just having this, like, titanic battle. At some point, I'm either going to, you know, paint it myself or get somebody to do it. It's just this titanic, like, woo, and they're like, and the adults are prying these little princesses apart as they're just like, I will kill you. And they're like, little girls only pull hair. They don't stab each other with scissors. And Jenna's like, I will kill you. You have tried to kill this kitten. Justice for the kitten. And, you know, so she gets sent to bed without cake, and she's mad. She's like, it's my birthday. I saved the kitten. What about justice for the kitten?
Oh, wow. Okay. So I was...
Anyway, sorry.
It's okay.
Whatever your questions were, please, you know, keep going.
I was at some point going to ask about genre, but at this point, I think I should just check all of the above and call it a day. So would you say that as much as the horror elements and the fantasy elements and kind of the all of these elements that you've described are encased in this story, which is the beginning of a series of stories, as you mentioned? I mean, is there space for the contemplative moments? Is there space for the humor? It seems like it's just such a grand bouquet of a story, and you've given these characters such life and such breadth. I mean, do you feel like they're they have all of the energy, the life that you want them to have. I mean, it seems almost infectious for you.
Well, so the original draft of this was a giant, huge, massive cloud, and I was like, "Why won't you go to small?" And so I spent by dividing this into a series where each story focuses on a particular Black American princess, and it's a Black American princess versus something. So there is one that's about the church girl, so that you can talk about the church, and something bad is in the basement. And the pastor goes down. When he comes back up, something's wrong with the pastor. And the pastor's wife isn't going to go down from nothing to nobody because the congregation's been giving her shit since she married him. And they're like, well, you need to be sacrificed to the eldritch creature that's by the boiler room. And she's like, I don't think so. Y'all can go down first. And the choir is like, well, you know what? They're going to argue all day. Let's just go down. And so you have ring shouts. You can talk about the church in that story through the eyes of a Black princess. And so by dividing it, this story is just about Jenna was a really good way to start, because the magic of my story is confidence. Everybody is 100% confident in whatever they are. I have people everybody is bisexual, or if they're not bisexual, they're not, like, the people are having sex. There's spicy moments. Just FYI.
And we're gonna get to that question. Don't you worry.
Yeah, it ain't just salt and pepper that I am putting in this stew. It is so hold on to your butts, guys. If you are conservative and you are not interested in people going downtown, don't read this book. It ain't for you. It's just not.
You may have just single-handedly increased the amount of people on the live. they're all like, oh wait, no, these two are talking about spice. Count me in.
Well, because one, I took out all of the angst. It was so easy to write about angst and degradation and sadness, and I was like, okay, we're going to elevate this to a beach read level of, like, everybody is not spending a lot of time just. Instead, I thought, what if you just have everybody being okay with their sexuality? Like, you have a guy who can get on his knees and go downtown for an hour, and he's cool with it. No existential crisis. And he has a boyfriend. And you know what he's also really good at? Shooting and killing things. And how his sexuality has no bearing on his effectiveness as a monster hunter. Yeah. And that is never... And so instead of it being... Like, I think something that I worked really hard on was a transgendered, non-binary character. Because the witches in my story are boo hags. Boo hags are African-American based. It's a skin witch. It's actually where the word nightmare is based upon, because used to jump out of their skins and then ride somebody like a horse at night. And so there's all of this fantastically creepy, awful, like, folk horror about the boo hag. And so in my story, the boo hags, as they're born this way, but they go through an adolescence where they're jumping skins. So female, male, black, white, tall, fat, as they're figuring out who they are until they finally settle on, a particular shape and a particular skin. But they go through sort of this metamorphosis where they are transgendered because they just are not. The point of the magic is to try out new skins.
Gotcha.
And one of the characters doesn't ever want to settle on one. Like, that is, and so, like, forsakes their original skin and goes from Rosabelle to Sable. But because that is where all of their magic goes into, they are not, they use it all up so they can't protect themselves from other things that can find their original skin. And so you have a character that is, their magic is changing bodies, but it also has its pros and its cons. So I really tried to talk about how, and it's totally normal. Instead of it being like, oh my God, like, they're a parent, instead of being a mother, or, I tried really hard to be an ally, since there was a TikTok that talked about, there was another author where they got the feedback that trans, NBs, disabled people, like, they're in the world. They're not like, whoa, there's a person with a wheelchair. They're part of the world. And so just make them a part of the world. You don't have to make it a big deal. You just make them in your story.
Yeah.
And that has been, I mean, I'm really kind of anxious, but what debut author isn't anxious? I really hope the respect that I put into the story gets translated and like it comes across, because I mean it very sincerely, instead of it being like, well, this is what I think. I'm like, this is a type of witch. It makes sense to the story and the magic that if you aren't like, maybe I don't want to be tall. Like, I have wanted to be 5'10" my whole life, and then I stopped at 5'7", and I remember I had my like goal height because I was going through the growth spurt, and I had like it marked, and then I stopped and I was glaring at the wall, being like, no, you're not done. You got 3 inches to go. And body's like, sorry, babe, this is where you are. You're the shortest person in your family. And it's like, Chris is foiled by my own genetics. Anyway.
No,
I can talk about this a lot.
Something you touched on. You've been talking about bringing different supernatural players into the story, but also making sure that you're kind of seamlessly integrating, like you said, non-binary characters, disabled characters, making sure that there's not really a division. They just exist in this space, is something I think that's coming to be more regular, but it's at times still has a little bit of a, doesn't have as much traction, especially when it comes to other forms of media. But I love the energy that you're bringing to it, and the fact that it's flowing with it. Now, one thing I wanted to ask, because you've talked a lot about influences, you've been talking about other things. What was your first real introduction into like supernatural horror? Almost, I don't want to qualify it, just throw it into one qualifier and say, oh, werewolves, vampires, mermaids, supernatural horror. But I'm going to say, what was your initial introduction into the supernatural?
Well, I happen to have that book on me. So,
everybody's getting a reading list. I hope everybody's ready. There's a reading list.
There is a reading list. Okay, so the very first book, I got it at the Scholastic Book Fair, because back in the day, there were just not heroines with black hair. I picked it for the cover alone.
That book.
I love, to this day, Garth Nix. Has, like, the love is real. I saw a first edition copy of this, and I was like, no, I can't afford it. And to this day, I wish I'd just bankrupted myself buying it, because it was just like... But I read this story, and it was the first real horror story, because it's, girl, her father's a necromancer, and right next door is a land full of like dead things. And they don't call it zombies or demons, they call it dead things. And it is hard. It is bleak. And, even when you win, it doesn't feel like you won. And you're like, wow.
Yeah, like, right?
And you read other stuff, like his earlier stuff, it's even worse. There's one where you're just like, dude, this was the first book you wrote for kids? And, so that was the first one. And then the second one was this. I did not know, I don't know if you can read this with the ring light. So it's called The Silver Wolf by Alice Borchardt. This is Anne Rice's sister. I didn't know that.
Wait, hold on. She's Anne Rice's sister?
Yes. And here's the other thing. So I have been waiting for Anne Rice to write a book. Yeah. So this is her book. I met Anne Rice. I actually met her in person. She came to my town, our home city, and they had on the radio, Anne Rice is going to be at the bookstore. And I was like, well, I know what I'm doing on my Friday. Forget it. And I went there, and I got there early, and I sat for 3 hours and just, I could have gone early, but I wanted to just look at how this woman changed the genre. And all of these adults, and I'm listening to their stories as they're talking about, like, how her books helped, like, their brother in prison, or, like, their mother passed away and used to read the stories to them, and how this was a story that kept going. And I have to read you, she actually wrote me a little thing, I'm going to say it. She said, to me, good luck with your writing. Keep the faith. We need you, Anne Rice. And that was 2012. And I was like,
yeah, I could see how that would, yeah, and did it for a lot of, like, that was the original vampire story. Like those were the ones that kind of like grounded me. Was the Anne Rice, was the interview series, and everything that spawned beyond that, you know.
Vittorio. I remember we listened to it on audiobook. I remember
Yeah.
Vittorio, my brother, my dad, and I would drive. And like, I remember we finished the audiobook and we were sitting in the parking lot by a hotel because we were supposed to go in, and no one wanted to go outside, including my dad. And we're like, Dad, you need to go. And he's like, No, we can just like take a second. I'm like, Well, you're the adult. And I was like, then to my little brother being like, We're quick. And he's like, You're just trying to sacrifice me. I'm on to you. And I'm like, Well, there's another boy. It'll be fine. It's just like,
Dad, you've lived the longest. Go.
Well, Dad was the doctor, so we couldn't actually sacrifice him. But, my brother, he was the third born, whatever, his brother. I had a baby brother, just sacrificed one of them. And, by the way, the Garth Nix book I'm talking about is Sabriel. That's the very first one. The Abhorsen and Lyriel and Clariel, he wrote another one that came out later on. But I still, I go back to that, and I'm just like, it's such deliciously fragrant writing. And then fragrant, maybe it's not the right word, but then you have other things like this one. Have you read Cassandra Khaw? Man, her stuff crawls into your brain and just eats you.
Okay, you know what? We're friends now because I've never seen anybody break out Cassandra Khaw before. So we're just done. You're stuck with me forever.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, cool.
We're Stitch buddies. Remember, we've got the same shirt.
There you go. Stitch buddies and book buddies. We've started a club. Anybody want to join?
I mean, I think it takes a certain type of person. When Lilo beat the bricks off that girl, I was like, yes. This is true. What you wish you could do to all of those girls. Like, you're straight. Boom! Like, I know I am. Bam! And here's my fist to your face.
She bit me. That's all I remember. And the speech about
I was that
punch
kid.
The fish.
I actually have totally bit my way out of a dog pile. And then, people landed on top of me, and I chewed, bought, scratched, and fit. And people were like, who did that? I was like, I don't know.
This'll do it. Yeah, you know what?
Let's talk about, which is why I did roller derby, and I was really good at roller derby.
Roller derby?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. So if you're just now joining us, we're talking about bar fights, roller derby, and we're being novel nerds.
There's actually a video of me. I got interviewed for my debut game by Rolling Stone. If you Google Rolling Stone and roller derby, it's in Austin, Texas, and my derby name is Block a Con because
that is so friggin' cool. Okay, that's perfect.
I was on the Holy Rollers. It was super fun.
That is so cool. That is so cool. Oh, man. See, now, here's the thing. Now I end up interviewing somebody cooler than me again. And this is just this keeps happening on TikTok Lives as I interview people. And
it just means you have a talent for finding cool people in the morass of people you could interview.
So what, is there anything okay, I'm going to take a couple of minutes because we got to talk about this because I too, as everybody on here knows, I too write spicy. So you had mentioned before in a TikTok that you'd posted about writing spicy scenes and trying to interject them into the writing. What would you say is the one thing that comes the easiest and the thing that's the hardest when it comes to writing the spicy sequences?
One, making sure it's not monotonous. You have, of course, your Barbie dolls of who's going what, where at one time. And you also have to realize that, in a threesome or with one or more person, more than two people, somebody at some point is just watching because there's only so many hands.
Yes.
And you can have someone butthurt in the corner being like, why am I not having a baby? And or you can have someone who is vibing. And so the key about it has been, I'm a huge fan of, Laurel K. Hamilton. Mm-hmm. And, except the thing is, the main character didn't get a lot of service. She was doing a lot of stuff for the guys. And I got really tired.
That is such a problem when it comes to writing. It's ridiculous.
And that's the thing, is that you have a lot of, like, I read my way through the romance section of the library. Like, you know, you're 12, you're like, I'm interested in men, I must read romance so that I can learn. And they're like, that's not how guys actually are. And I was like, nonsense, people have written books about it. And you know, so you read a couple hundred because you have nothing to do in town, and so, like, you live a very isolated place. So I live in a place that's a lot like this town. It's based upon, like, the location is based upon it.
Gotcha.
And the whole thing about what I try to emphasize is sensuality.
Yeah.
And the touch, and how you can, it was actually described to me by someone. She was like, you can have chocolate or vanilla, but sometimes you have gas station chocolate and you have gourmet vanilla that has been plucked from the jungle and has been rolled in the hands of lush women whose tan bodies have been in the sun and gilded, and everything that they touch turns golden and delicious, and they use their tongues, and it's still vanilla, but it is the best vanilla you have ever had in your life.
Does anybody else really want vanilla all of a sudden? All of a sudden it's getting very warm out here in the outdoors, and I want vanilla. Jeez Louise.
And so, yeah, talking about the sensuality, because you have to get people here. And there's only so many, you know, like, whatever. It's like, but if you can make it, like, Bridgerton, why was season 2 sexier than season 1? I mean, because that guy's booty was out there all the time. What?
Yeah.
It was looks. It was the centering that one moment. And the funny thing is, horror and romance are the exact same. I wrote a horrifying scene that actually I had to cut because people are like, Kat, you went too deep. You went too deep. And I was like, what are you talking about? I mean, they're like, you went too deep. Where I, spent this time with a, it was being read more like a rape. And I was like, nope, there is no R words.
Yeah.
ASAs, we're just going to take all it out. So that's the reason why I had to rewrite the whole scene. But I can describe it here. In the scene, I have the character grabbed, and he has his thumb in her mouth. And all she can focus on is the claw that is digging its way through her tongue. And then as she's fighting to get away from him, it gets hooked in her, scrapes along her gum, and then gets hooked in her cheek. And so she's biting on that thumb as hard as she can. And everything else that he's doing doesn't matter because she's just trying to stop
focused on
that thumb.
Yeah.
And so I don't describe anything else except for the thumbnail.
Yeah.
And how all of her focus is trying to bite it off. And then he actually hurts him, and he jerks, and he rips her jaw, just all the meat out of her cheek, and just pulls them. And that's it. And everyone was like, you went too deep. And I was like, all I did was describe a thumb.
Yeah.
And so if you do that exact same thing for a sex scene, and you can say, she traced the curve of his ear and slowly passed her fingers down along the cord of his neck and tickled the edge of his collar. He was hyper aware of his own breath and the rush of his stubble against her fingernails.
Yeah.
She hasn't done anything sexual,
Absolutely,
but the anticipation is already there.
Well, I think it's funny because that's actually been where a lot of the conflict in the past. I mean, I was writing scenes specifically that would pass the community guidelines on here. And a lot of the times I would get stuff shut down only to have it put back up because, in honesty, the imagery you're creating is up here. It's not you're not being told every step and every movement, right?
Right. Does that help at least? Because, I mean...
Absolutely. Because I think a lot of the times, as I forgot the name of the other poster on here, and I'll have to find one of her posts, but she goes over really horribly written, spicy scenes.
Yes, I follow her too.
Awful dialogue and horrible descriptions, and you're just like, oh. So I always find it's the kind of thing that when I'm talking to somebody who actually interacts with the eroticism in literature, but does it in a way that's not necessarily just point A to point B to point B, insert into slot C, and you're just like, okay, there has to be a more eloquent way of handling this. And I think that your chocolate vanilla still a little bit hot by that one. I'm gonna be honest with you, that was a little warm, but the analogy was I think the analogy was perfect. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the even the thumb thing, you were talking about the thumb along the interior of the cheek. Remove the claw from that scenario, and you could have a sensual interaction where it's focused on that motion, but if in the right mindset and not, not involving the violence of the situation, that could turn into the beginning of the scene right there. So you're right. Horror and spicy scenes have a tendency to get a little too. They are like a hair's distance apart, aren't they?
Yeah, that's actually. I read a lot of like how-to books. There's this great book called Romancing the Beat that takes the Save the Cat arc and actually breaks it down like a romance novel and gives you all kinds of like different types of like examples for each step. And it's really helpful for horror because you just think. So I thought of like, where is the worst meet cute? Where could you meet the man of your dreams in like the place that guarantees you will never, ever, never, ever marry this man? And I thought, I have been to a place this bad. It is the Cape Coast Castle in Accra, Ghana, which is responsible for 95% of the kidnapped Africans who ended up in North America. It is a real life horrible. It was a horrible place. And the worst part was my tour was with a whole bunch of one percenters from Canada and America who were taking selfies on the ramparts while we were there. Like, it was this real life haunted house of 400 years of degradation. And there was a church built on top of the men's dungeon. And I thought, what if you meet the guy of your dreams in the dungeon? And he's going through it, and he's like, and you're going through it, and you're like, and you look at each other, and you go, congratulations, I will never marry you, because if I see you again, you'll remind me of this place, and I can barely be here now, let alone want to see you for the rest of my life. And I thought, like, yes, they will never get together because of this scene.
Yeah.
And, I mean, and also, like, I wanted to straight up, like, I wanted to do something to those girls who were, like, posing and taking selfies, because they're like, the ocean is turquoise, and the sky is, like, lapis, and it's, like, just so beautiful. And I thought there is no plausible way I could push these women off the side, because I will go to prison. It won't even be worth it.
But at least the trip would be short, because the dungeon's right downstairs, so it's like...
But then I'd have to be stuck there for the rest of my life because of those hoes. No. I was not going to lose my freedom because these vapid people do not care. And it was such a great perspective for me that I am like weeping and having this moment and being confronted by people being like, you know, your pain really made the whole tour more real for me. Let's sing a bunch of Negro spirituals on our tour bus on the way back. And I'm like, do you know any? And they're like, well, what about We Shall Overcome? I'm like, do you know the words to that song? I'm like, well, what about Amazing Grace? I'm like, do you know the words to that, you tone deaf person?
And can we just take a moment and wonder how the cringe of the universe didn't just swallow that man whole for asking you about the
tour bus
they were going to sing
bus
on oh my
full
God.
of people. It was this horror show where you keep waiting for something, like you're so emotionally locked down that part of writing that scene was very cathartic because I had just like, at that point, you're in the middle. It's like Hostel. Like you're like 2/3 of the way through Hostel. You're so emotionally locked down. You don't really care about anything. You're just getting through.
Yeah.
And that was like a way to kind of like remember some of the stuff because afterwards they're like, let's all go eat on this beach side and we're going to have lobster. And I'm like standing there just like,
we were just at the site of a human atrocity and an attempt to genocide. Do you guys want to go get lobster rolls? Sure.
It was literally down the beach. You could see it from where we were eating. It was down the beach. And to your right was another slave fortress. And the weirdest thing was that there were two people who made that bearable. One was a person who was not part of the tour. She was Dutch. And her family, what did the Dutch do for the slave trade? Let's just talk about the Dutch. And we were at the British one. The Cape Coast Castle is the British one, but the Dutch one is much bigger. So she's there with her husband, and she's just like, oh my God. And we gave each other like the head nod of two soldiers deep in a mud-filled, corpse-ridden, foxhole of like, hello, old soldier, hello, soldier.
Well, because I mean, wouldn't it? But because I think probably, and not to put anything on this, but I mean, at least in Dutch culture, they've openly talked about and confronted this stuff. Whereas you're in a group of people, you're literally with a group of people who all this stuff has been whitewashed in history books for so long that it's just kind of like they don't care. And you're, oh God, okay.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's really fun to have well, my people didn't. I'm like, you bought a hockey team for fun.
Yeah.
I totally think that, okay. But, and that's the point, is that writing the story is about rage because there are so many, like, self-control is a werewolf's greatest hurdle. And self-control is a Black person's greatest hurdle. You cannot, if you act upon your rage, people kill you. Like, and it might not be physical death, it might be social death, it might be all kinds of things might happen to you, or people feel absolved of guilt because they're like, well, she snarled at me first, so I get to do whatever. And if you, like, for example, that little video I did about if you were a werewolf and there was a high school shooter, I got a lot of responses from that. I mean, I was like, okay, we're steering down a dark path. We need to get this right back up. Yeah. And they talk about how the Hulk is, and they compared the Hulk to the Black narrative as well. And same with Jekyll Hyde and a lot of like the freedom of rage and lack of accountability. Yeah. And what everybody wishes is that they could do what they wanted to do and there were no consequences. And the thing is, there are always consequences. And to pretend that there's not is actually a sign of privilege. Like, as much as I love Interview with the Vampire, the scene that always stuck with me, like in the movie, was the slaves that they were feeding on in the plantation. And you have the vampires are there, and they're, Lestat, and they're doing his things, and he's having the whole existential crisis and whatever. But you have all of these Black people who can't leave, who know that there's a monster, knows that they're being eaten, and they eventually burn the place down. But what they don't show is what happens to those Black people after they burn that crap down. Who gets punished for burning the house of Master? What happened to those people? And so, unfortunately, Anne Rice is great, but like, there's one strong Black witch, and you know what happens to her? She gets killed, and you're like, come on. And so, there's a lot of stories where, with the best of intentions, you realize that they have a blind spot, and that blind spot is where you are in fact standing. And so you have to, instead of being like, mad about it, you go, okay. One last story. I know I'm talking a lot.
That's why you're here.
Okay, fine. All right. Well, then I'm not sorry. Anyway, several years ago, there's this great convention called Armadillo Con, which is a science fiction fantasy con for, fans by fans. There's been all kinds of amazing people. Like, I got to meet Holly Black, the author, who is amazing. And if you haven't read Coldest Girl of Coldtown, hold on, let me get that book. This is a great vampire book. This book, highly recommend. Coldest Girl of Coldtown is a really fun story about a teenage girl who wakes up and the house party has been eaten by vampires. And the only reason why she hasn't been eaten is that she got drunk and passed out in the bathtub. And it is late afternoon. And she has to and the vampires are in the basement. She has to get out, and she has to get her keys, and she has to find what's going on. And that's just the opening. I haven't told you anything about the story. But
Okay.
it's a YA. I really like stories that talk about monsters in a nuanced way, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so you can have all of these different situations. But not everybody likes the upgrade of, not just vampires but blackulas, not
Yeah.
just zombies but actual people who talk about like hoodoo practices respectfully, and how like writing about magic in a way that does not talk about somebody else's culture like it's a costume
Okay.
also requires a lot of research, because you have to address your own stereotypes. With the best of intentions, you can be a racist asshole.
Yeah.
And so anyway, there was this guy. His name was Lou Antonelli. I think COVID killed him, but he gets up there. There was this thing. This was during the height of the sad puppies and the rabid puppies. Do you know all about that? Um, there was a group of people who were really unhappy about the Hugos being multicultural.
Yes. Yes. I remember this. I remember this. I remember the whole. Yeah.
So I had just entered the, I'm going to be a published author thing right when
Yeah.
this like, so I'm at this convention and this panel has this guy who's like, segregation was fine. You got the black people over here, the Italian people over here, and everybody was just fine. What's everybody's problem? Back in the 70s, it was fine. What's your problem? And I had a little voice in the back of my head, and it was my grandfather's voice that was like, well, Calvin, all you have to do is choose your arena.
Mm-hmm.
There are isms everywhere. You
Yeah.
said you wanted to be an author.
Mm-hmm.
You have to deal with people like this who genuinely believe that this special little science fiction fantasy is theirs and only theirs. And it was the thing that got them through high school. And by God, they have forgotten the fact that it's everybody's anchor. That sometimes that isolated weird kid reading horror or reading fantasy, reading about dragons is how you get yourself out of wherever you are, because you can't physically leave. And you're supposed to say the sandbox is big enough for everybody to play in, instead of like, me, mine. And that division I was, literally seeing. So I stood up and was like, hi, I'm a young black author. I know nothing about any of the sad puppies, blah, 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 blah. I am just trying to get my book published. What do you, racist old man, have to say to me? To my face, not online, to my face. Breathing the same air. Let's see it.
Yeah.
What do you got? And he was like, crumpled like a freaking souffle, whatever. And then I got mobbed by people who were like, you're so brave. And like, just suddenly all these people are like, you said something. We were waiting. And I wasn't saying something to gain attention. I was saying something for me, because I cannot discount the fact that as a female woman of color who's writing about a lot of stuff, I am going to encounter a whole lot of hate. And that the pep talks I've gotten from authors have been like, well, it's better than it used to be. It used to be 70% hate and 30% good. Now it's 50-50. And I'm like, is there ever going to be a point where this is not going to suck?
I was going to say, why do you make it sound like that's better when in fact what we're looking for is zero hate and 100% acceptance? And how is it still taking us this long to get there?
But the thing is, being the granddaughter of civil rights activist, you do it anyway. That was the thing that they taught me, is you do it anyway, because to do otherwise is to not, my family would say it in a much better way, but they're like, to do nothing is evil. Like, you have to. So like Black excellence and legacy and the pride that comes from my personal family, like my father showed up. Like, my grandfather couldn't swim, but he stood in the pools when they were being desegregated and they threw rocks at him. He lay in front of a bulldozer in a 3-piece suit to protect a block of black businesses. Like, he walked into hardcore gang territory, sat down in front of the gangsters and said, so why are all the young black men killing each other? And they were like, who the frick is this guy? Like, and my grandmother was the same. Everybody in my family were these hardcore, did the thing. They didn't talk about it. They actually showed up. So you can't not show up. And ironically, roller derby gave me an appreciation of like what physical violence actually takes,
Yeah.
and that like a warrior is actually going to actively avoid getting hit and like do a whole lot to avoid that, kick in the teeth. Because someone kicks you in the teeth, your brain's bouncing around the inside of your skull. It doesn't matter how big and tough you are, your brain is going, look, I have this bone bowl and a bunch of jello to keep me in one spot. That's it. It doesn't matter what's going on from the neck down. Someone hits you here, you toast. You're a roasted bread product.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm big and swole. Ding! Someone hits you in the right place. Forget about it.
Yeah.
So, roller derby was when I like learned, like, there was this beautiful woman, this gorgeous 250. Everyone was terrified of her. Her name is Picante, and they'd be like, Picante, and just boom, boom, Gladiator comes on the track. And she would cross-train doing football. And so she would hit you with forensic precision in the middle of your thigh, and it was like you lost your leg. Just gone.
I can feel that, and it hurts from here. Ooh.
And I was like, can we be best friends? And she's like, my soul requires blood between its teeth. And I'm like, hi, hello, I too would like to be terrifying. Please teach me your ways. How much will it cost? I will practice with you multiple times each week because I too crave blood between my teeth. And it's just so wonderful meeting someone else like you. And she's like, okay. And then, you do practice, and, I'm bouncing off against her like, me, tugboat versus ocean liner. And then I was like, okay, hit me at 50%. Like, roll, climb back up, shake yourself off. And you're like, okay, hit me at 5%. And we will work our way up to 50.
We're going to get back there.
And she was totally sweet. But I, loved that everyone would just, their faces would just go, oh my God, it's Pika. And she's just, this gorgeous, voluptuous. I mean, you can't actually do things, but man, you think about it. And so you have just this gladiator being like, we shall have a death match. And you're like,
okay.
Okay. And then you're like, no.
But not, you're like, we're going to have a death match, but not like that. I mean, that's a completely different scene where we're writing the difference between horror and spicy.
Man, being bisexual and doing derby when you're helping with stretches, you're on top of girls who are being super flexible boobs for days that wear basically nothing, and they're like, push me harder. And you're like, okay. And they're like, and it's just coming out of everything, and you're just on top, and she's like, stretch my hamstrings a little longer. You're like, okay, and you're on top, and you're going, I am straight. I'm very straight. I'm straight. And she's just like, everything is. Can you take this TikTok?
Respectfully.
And there's no respect. There's just like.
You're like, I tried my best. It only made it so far.
There's booty shorts everywhere, and you're just like, everything's great. And then you have a cornucopia, a bevy of babes. And they're all in amazing shape, and they are all hardcore. And these women will fuck you up. You watch them destroy each other, and you're like, this is awesome. And then you realize that you're one of those crazy people where you don't have, I was actually ready to fight. So if people mess with me, I got the crazy eyes, apparently, instead of the, yeah, we're going to fight. It's the, my size 10s are going down your throat, and I'm going to break your arm so many times it never heals. They're like, you're supposed to play. And I was like, I'm not going
to
play.
But blood sport, can we, a little bit about.
I was like, but I've got skates on my feet. I'm weaponized. Yeah. I can, fuck you up.
Yeah.
Why not? And they're like, because you're not supposed to fuck people up. And I'm like,
aw.
Man.
You guys have made it no fun. As a former boxer, I completely concur with you about the head hitting thing. It is that moment where you realize that everything up here is literally the moneymaker, because if this isn't intact, then forget it. Yeah. So I completely understand. Completely.
Ultimately why I left, because there were just too many concussions. Well, I had this weird moment where in the middle of the big game, I had at the same time in that same weekend, while being interviewed, all the things, you've reached the mountaintop, is the writing convention where I've met all of these people. And so a little voice in my head, as Peak is coming out, ready for the gladiator fight, a little voice is saying, if you don't fight her right now, you will be in enough shape that you can go back to that writing convention and cement the relationships that you made. Which is more important, good writing or roller derby? Which... And so I thought about it, and then I sat my ass down because I chose the book. And I don't regret it. I mean, I'm really glad I did it. I'm really, and I got out safely and everything. But I think that when I was trying to do both, it was 100% commitment. If you're going to do it, do it. People who are, I was cross-training. I was in the best shape of my life. I was working out at the gym all the time. I got hurt. I scared the physical therapist because I was like, okay, how many times do I need to be here? They're like, well, she's like, you've torn all the muscles in your thigh. I'm like, yes, I know. So what is it going to take? They said I have 6 weeks. How many times do I need to be here? How often do I need to do? What kind of stretches do I need to do? And like the stretch machine is shaking as I'm jumping around. They're like, I think you're fine. You're like, you said it was 6. It's only been 5. It was like, you need to calm down.
They told me I had to be here 6 weeks. I bet I can get it done in 4. Let's go. Like, yeah.
Yeah, no, and they're like, I probably could have gotten out in 4, but I know too many people who skated on injuries and have multiple fused whatever the heck. And so when they said 6, it was going to be 6. And they're like, but we need you on the track. And I was like, you know what? You're not going to be there for me when I need my knees. Now when I'm 60, I have to be damn before I get a hip replacement. No.
It's like, I'd like to keep doing this, but I'd also like my spine to keep working the way it's supposed to. So
I wasn't a team player.
I don't know. And that's the funniest thing in the world. Like, I mean, roller derby, all the respect in the world, because some of the derby runners up here, when I was teaching boxing and taking classes, some of the derby members were actually in the boxing and MMA classes as well. And you're just like, and you're talking about like knee braces, shoulder braces, elbow braces, kinesio tape from one end of your body to the other, up, down, left, and center. And you're just like, I nothing but love, but at the same time, you have to at some point realize that you're going to be a ball in a wheelchair because you aren't going to be able to move your toes by the time you're like 70. So,
yeah,
and it's tough though, but it's such. I mean, there's something about that act, like something about that kinetic, the visceral, primal nature of it that just rings true. So I sympathize with you when it comes to that taste on the back of your tongue.
Because what's the real fun part? You get to take all that big booty and thigh and hit the shit out of those skinny bitches. Because who get just wrecked on the track? The 100-pound when wet that you can hang. You fold them like laundry. There was this girl who was built like a giraffe. I knocked her so far off the track, I had to turn around, grab her by her long, long legs, and drag her back onto the track. I mean, you can hi, my name is Brittany, and I only weigh, whatever. And I was like, cool. I'm gonna be like, what kind of origami do you feel like being today? Because I'm gonna crush you like a beer can.
Did you by any chance fill out the organ donor card and the liability form on the way in? Because this is gonna get bad.
Hashtag this booty wrecks lives, and it's coming for you. I mean, it was so much fun. And so, then you get hit by someone who's much more powerful. Like Zara Problem was 6'2". She used to have braids, and I was like, what happens if somebody grabs your braids? And she's like, it's the last fucking thing that happens to them is what happens. And you're like,
I was gonna say that right there is a red flag.
Yeah, you have a live Valkyrie on skates with just boobs for days. Anyway, and you're just like, okay, I'm not ogling you, but God, you're beautiful. And everyone's like, are you okay? And I was like, I'm fine. Everything's fine.
You're just, I'm sitting here and trying to think about go team and we're good, and I'm not looking at you in any way, shape, or form. Those are really nice skates you got on there. Also, your helmet's pretty. Those are the two things I'm able to make eye contact with and not feel like I'm oogling you. Is that
I'm
cool?
like looking way back from a distance, way, you know, like my eyes are not dropping anywhere. So just below your eyebrows, it's like, your eyebrows look wonderful today.
And your braids are gorgeous, and this is all I'm focusing on, because if not, you're going to think I'm a perv. Okay, cool.
Like, happy thoughts, nothing but, no illicit, nothing. Which is why, you know, but then the same is true when I worked at Apple, and there was a point where there was all beautiful men. Like, I walked in, and the Prince of Persia was the manager, where he's just like, hi, I'm the manager in a medium shirt. And I was like, you're going to hire me. They're like, what? And I was like, yeah, you're going to hire me. You haven't even seen my resume, but you're going to hire me right now. That's what's going to happen. It's like,
okay. You know what? I can respect that. I can completely respect it. She's like, pardon me, but can I help you with anything you might require help with? Just putting that out there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's not how I flirt, which is why actually writing the back to the spicy scenes, I have to make sure that I am writing spicy scenes in different ways than I might personally react to a situation.
Yeah.
Because you have to make sure, because, like, have you ever seen Conan the Destroyer with Grace Jones? Who's like, I remember being really upset that my skin would not get as dark as hers. Like, my mom, like, saw me outside and I was lying. She's like, what are you doing? I was like, I have to get as dark as Grace Jones by Halloween. And she's like, you're not going to, that's not how melanin works. And I was like, what? But I'm black. She's like, yes, but there are different shades of black. And I'm like, but wait a minute. You know, and I was like really upset that, you know, I couldn't get the hair and I couldn't get the, like, the awesomeness. But, you know, you're, I don't know, first grade, however old you are in first grade or sixth, you know, and there was the point where you have the little pukey blonde who had, like, the annoying crush on Arnold Schwarzenegger being like, how do you get a guy to notice you? I'm, like, really interested. And Grace goes, you find a man and you take him. And I was like, cool, I can follow that. I can do that. Is that what you got to do? All right, that sounds fairly straightforward.
There's 2 steps? I thought this was more complicated, but
like,
okay.
You know, like, literally, you just like, okay, I remember. But then you find out that if you do find a man and you take him, they generally start to panic. And they're like, wait, don't bite my nipples. And you're like, why not? So, you know, you have to, like, find the right guy and find the right girl.
It's funny because there was another post that somebody sent me, and they're like, oh, blind duet this or blind stitch it or whatever. It was about tall women, and like how short guys go for short women and tall guys go for short women. And I'm like, it's just because a lot of men are challenged by worrying that the woman is going to try to dominate certain situations. But if they're comfortable with themselves and the people they're interacting with, they don't have a problem if the woman is assertive and likes to express themselves and it has a strong opinion on certain topics or dominates the situation. I'm like, yeah, the Grace Jones thing, I think, was always a really great example. I'm sorry, I blanked out at Grace Jones. You'll have to give me a second.
But she was hot, and she was so like, she was just hot. And you're just like, you know, when they say like smolder, you should just have her picture in the encyclopedia because it's just Grace Jones. They're like, oh, she can, oh, like, this person can smolder. I'm like, no. Smolder literally catches people on fire if she looks. Like, I found an old magazine that just was a random photo of her, like her and some model, and it's just her looking over their shoulder. And she smoldered out of that old grainy picture. I was like, she had this, you know, like, mwah! And so, you know, you're just like, okay. Not everybody.
And you try to, I feel like sometimes you try to insinuate that into your characters, like, where you just try to build it into a certain degree, and individuals like Grace Jones kind of helps because there's just such a natural energy to it that comes across no matter what the medium is, and you're just like, Yeah, she's got it. She has it. She's got all of us within her tractor beam. We're all just set. We're done.
Right. And so, but not every character in your book can be Grace Jones. Because then you have a whole lot. I mean, as fun as it would be to have a whole, 6 Grace Joneses, then you would have Death by Snoo Snoo, and there's really just no conversation at all. It's just like, grab a man, do a thing, and that's it, because the guy's really just there for a purpose, which not all of them are going to have a problem with that, but eventually the writing can get a little bit tired,
Yeah.
So, how have you found, I guess the question for you is, you're a guy writing women in a way that is respectful. What ways have you found that are successful?
I think the thing for me the approach that I've always taken when it comes to writing the spicy scenes has been playing it out more as poetic. But then again, the other thing is that I come from a very unique perspective, because I spend a lot of time. You talked about reading the romance novels growing up. I read the entire human sexuality portion of the library and then moved on to the romance novels. So I had the science to back up the information, and went through the whole Kinsey phase, and got all of it committed to memory. And it kind of evolved me into a place where I derived more pleasure. I derived a greater portion of pleasure in the scenario by giving pleasure to the people who are in the scene with me as much as my own. So translating that to the page, there's a certain evolution that just flows from the brain to the pen, so to speak, because you're like, okay, the focus of the man in these scenarios is not supposed to be the man, right? It's the classic problem with, hub education, as we say, because you just see scenes like that, and it's like, yeah, they can last 30 minutes, but there's 3 steps, and it's always going to end in, satisfaction.
So here's the thing that I wanted to point out, since the main character in my story is a good girl, is the hellish amount of knowledge that a good girl gets about not having sex, of this can happen to you, and all of the terrible things that can happen. And so I also, family of doctors, where my family's version of safer sex is, don't do drugs. Here's an actual brain. And this is what a brain looks like on meth, and this is what a brain actually looks like when it's healthy. Here are 2 brains. I want you to look at the actual brains, not pictures, actual brains in actual dishes. Here are lungs. This is what a pair of lungs look like when they've died of stage 4 lung cancer. This is what breast cancer looks like. So get these. You're like, okay. And so a lot of the
forensics and pathology. So background similar. So not exactly similar, but
But you're like, I don't want this to ever happen to me. Okay, stay on the right path. Take your kids to the hospital. Be like,
there you go.
This happen to you. And you're like, yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. But then you also can write about it. But what it doesn't have, what the Kinsey thing doesn't have, is sensuality and the why. Why would you put yourself in that situation? And because it feels good. Well, it doesn't work to say it's because it feels good. You have to embrace the fact that the human body itself is an erogenous zone. And that if you look at what made the courtesans of olden days, when people are like, oh my god, it's just her ankle, or oh my god, it's just her wrist, and why that wrist on that particular woman was more sexy, or the back of her neck because her hair was pulled up, why was that more sexy than someone who's completely naked? And that's where the sensuality and the eroticism comes from, because you have to, as they say, you got to hear the sizzle, because the sausages never taste as good as the sizzle and the smell. It doesn't matter what you put inside of that hot dog. The smell is always better, and the sizzle is always more appetizing than whatever the heck actually gets to your mouth. So that's why. Sorry.
Again, the end you're looking at the end result, but there's time, there's patience, there's elements, there's multiple forms and elements that have to come into the actual process in order to get the result that you're looking for. So if you're writing that scene or you're actually interacting in that scene, it can't just be, okay, pop in the microwave, boop, it's done, and it's fantastic, you know?
Yeah, like, but then some people are like, grilled cheese sandwich, buttered noodles kinds, where they really just want to do a thing. They don't really want the feathers and the whatnot, and they're just like, I want a grilled cheese sandwich. Maybe if I'm feeling sexy, I'll have a tomato on top. Actually, Terry Pratchett was the one who. I mean, I'm a huge. If I could write like Terry Pratchett, if you haven't read his stuff, you need to read his stuff. His like guards, like he's an English writer. His writing is it's funny and it talks about the human experience in a way that like lightens it. So just I would say read guards first before you read anything else. But basically, it's from a cop's perspective when a dragon shows up and starts burning the city. And he's just like, okay, everyone's like, there's a dragon! And he's like, well, how did it get here? And who's in charge? And they're like, why are you asking questions when the city is burning? And he's like, because the dragon wasn't here before, and the dragon is here now, and the dragon has to go someplace. So how did Giant Dragon end up in our city?
So wait a second. So you're hold on. Pump the brakes. Are you telling me that the dragon doesn't just enter the town and then you're just naturally supposed to kill the dragon? Come on now.
That's why you need to read the book. This is exactly why you need to read the book.
Exactly. Yeah.
So good.
No, it's those questions, and it's the funniest thing because I encounter this now. I've encountered this in years of being an educator. You have the questions coming from kids who are not resolved to the easy answers. And you have heard the stories time and again, but ask the questions like, why do we have to slay the dragon? Why did the dragon show up to begin with? It's those, and you're thinking, oh, okay, well maybe an action somewhere else caused the consequence of the dragon moving here, and so yeah, so evolving the thought is always important. I think, and oftentimes with the spicy scenes, evolving the thought beyond the simple activity makes it more relatable to people who aren't just necessarily looking for the visceral reaction of it,
because it's also the logistics are kind of boring.
Yeah.
It's just insert A in B and get C, literally. And it's just like
for everybody playing the home game, that's the easy way of explaining it to your kids.
And when they're like, but why would you do it? It sounds gross.
Yeah.
You're like, and you have to then be like, am I going to explain, sensuality to a little child? And, then you have and that's where it's like, I don't know how parents do it. But I mean, I've seen some people who are like, I will give you explicit detail in everything. And other people be like, well, it feels good. And then they get really mad when the kid says, it feels good when we are pregnant. Well, it felt good. You know? And so anyway, that's sorry, let's get on that.
You don't have to apologize. I hope my show usually runs until about 9 o'clock, so
just look at the time. Oh my god, we talked for 2 hours. My bad.
Don't
I mean, I'm
apologize.
actually not sorry at all.
I was gonna say this has been absolutely fun. I didn't know if it was cool with you if we saw if anybody had any questions real quick.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, thank you for your time. I didn't mean to take too much of it. I know. Hopefully, this wasn't this wasn't too painful a process added to the cart.
No, I really. This has been refreshingly fun. Excellent. And because you hope it's going to be fun, but you don't know.
Yeah.
And, it's like.
And then you're worried that depending on who you're sitting down with, like the questions can sometimes get really awkward really quickly, or they're way too basic, and before you know it, you're just repeating yourself because the answers are so bad, so
just I mean, sometimes I was looking at some of the questions you asked me, like why werewolves, and I was like, why Why?
Yeah, exactly. Why not?
That's such a big question.
To be okay, but to be fair, you were like, well, I'm kind of a little nervous about this. And I was like, well, I'll just throw out some very basic questions. And then it's so funny because the second you got on, you had so much to say that was just fantastic. I was like, I don't even need to ask questions. She's going to answer everything that everybody needs to know anyway. So this is perfect.
Practice. I like sat down and practiced, and I mean this because I'm very. I mean, you have a lot of people going, self-published and anti whatever, but like the book is coming out on Halloween in direct response to the amount of support that I got on TikTok from people who helped me when I was in a really bad headspace, where I was writing this book, and people kept saying, "Oh my God, werewolves, why?" And I was like, "This is it's kind of an allegory about the Black experience."
I was actually gonna say, like, because of the way that you've described it and the nature of rage and your firsthand perspective and the anecdotes that you've told, it kind of the parallels are extremely apparent from the get-go.
Right, but that doesn't always come across in a pitch.
Yeah.
And so someone says, well, you're just writing about werewolves with the Black. And then you get weird questions of like, so are they putting dreadlocks in their hair? And I was like, in their fur? And I was like, aside from the fact that there's so much wrong with that particular statement, they're going to look like a pulley if they do. There's actually a breed of dog that looks like it's got dreadlocks, but thanks for playing. And then the other thing is that what I found with the big epic that I was writing, I wrote this huge epic and I am going to publish it. But it was like trying to score a symphony when you've never written music before. And suddenly you're trying to be like, what does a timpani sound like? As opposed to a clarinet and a French horn and a bass, a saxophone. All of them, so you just don't know what the frick you're doing, right? And so when I wrote this haunted house story, like after I worked the haunted house, I was like, you know what you need to do? You need to do a violin duet. Same music, same instrument, two of them doing a thing. So what are we talking about? A black witch, werewolves. And we're going to have a hunter in there, and we're going to have, so I wrote the story over and over again, and then I pitched it to international best-selling author, and she was like, you didn't put enough of yourself in the story. And she's like, you need to really think about the setting. What do you know? What is your background? Tell me about you. I was like, well, she's like, so I described my background. She's like, why aren't you writing about that? Why aren't you? And so I thought, I went to this town, and this place was a trip. There was a lot, and that's what the reason the town Sweetwater, which is the premise for the story, is based upon a real place, and this real place was the summer home for plantation owners, the really successful plantation owners from the South. When it got too hot, they'd move up to this town. And it was also good for the big businessmen who didn't want to breathe all the smog from all of their companies. And so this place is very, very, very isolated. And they don't talk about when it was desegregated, because I was part of that. And they don't talk about a lot of stuff, or the fact that the town is named after a not now extinct tribe of Native Americans. They don't talk about any of that stuff. And you think about all of the absurdities. Like when I just sat down and I thought, what if monsters came to my town and just ate all of those people? And I was like, and because just like
that laugh said it all. It summed it up so perfectly. I was like, yeah, I feel that completely.
Because the town is a lot like, if you've seen Jordan Peele's Get Out, the town is like that.
Oh boy.
And so add werewolves and vampires and all kinds of fun things that eat those people. It just sounds like such deliciousness.
Yeah.
And, and I thought, why not? Why not write a story about a place you know way too much about? And why don't you write about your favorite thing happening to those? And let's say that when the dragons do eat them, you hear them chew. And you just, allow the... And it's really interesting how that story just kind of bloomed in my hands when I gave a setting that I knew a lot more about, as opposed to like another place. And I like honed it in. It was like distilling. So instead of feeling like I didn't have enough room to run, it actually felt like I was able to boil it down to its essential elements. And that writing the story about princesses And that at the end of the day, this is a dark fairy tale. It is a princess who is protecting her castle and her family. The wolves are in the forest coming to eat her horses. And the stable hands are like, well, let's just hide because they'll go away. And she knows that they won't. So she has to get on her horse, strap on an elephant gun and her bow and arrow that she's just learned how to do just because she's wanted to learn. She goes out there and she faces the wolves because no one will if she doesn't. And the type of bravery that takes, even when people make fun of you and even when people think that you're crazy, she still knows that the wolves are coming for her horses. And she cannot stand by and allow them to die. She cannot allow the vampires to take her family. She cannot allow the castle to be taken. And it doesn't matter that nobody believes her. It doesn't matter that she's alone because she knows what she's doing. And she's 100% confident. And if you think of a woman who has 100% confidence, who grew up believing she was a princess, and then her parents buy her a castle and they give her horses and ponies and everything to ride, and she's wearing poofy dresses and she sleeps in the tallest tower and there's monsters in the forest, and she's literally has no reason to think that fairy tales aren't real because her family has so much money, it basically replaces magic. Yeah. So she's already stratified. She's already alone. She already has very few people to talk to. So weirdly, that vampire girl who lives across like the forest and the old woman who lives in the woods, who's been there since before Lewis and Clark trekked across Pennsylvania, those are her frames of reference, is a monster and a witch. Why would she be like, magic isn't real? Because she knows that magic will straight up eat you. Yeah. She's not going to be like, okay, guys, you need to believe me. And they're like, no. And the vampire, Katie, like, the bad guy, Katie McBride was so much fun. I wrote this vampire girl where she doesn't apologize to nothing. Okay. She is obsessed with the main character. And she's been obsessed with her because Jenna is the only one who has ever told her no. And no one tells a vampire no. Gotcha. At least not for long. Yeah. And no one beats the bricks off of them for doing something that they're not supposed to. Because she had originally brought that kitten as a present, expecting Jenna to eat the kitten because she's a vampire. She thought, here. And Jenna's like, you're freaking weird that you'd rather eat a kitten instead of birthday cake, but okay. Crazy. And so you have just these two girls, and Katie is a lesbian, but she's not able to come out to the town. So she spreads a rumor that Jenna is a lesbian. Well, you know what that's going to do to Black excellence, which is not all about sexuality? 2 years before her debutante ball, so that she has her presentation ball at 16, and everybody thinks that she's a joke, even though her tiara has real diamonds in it, even though her dress is the best, even though she looks the most beautiful. Suddenly, she's complicated.
All it takes is that one rumor to basically, and because people are already looking for flaws in the design, that's all they needed. Yeah.
Right. So the fabulous wealth, they just suddenly mean you either have people who don't believe in it, or that she's complicated, and then all of the logistics, and that it's not exactly homophobia because it's really about children. And if you are into women, well, who is going to be the father? Who's going to, the sperm has to come from a good family. It has to have no, problem. So then is it your brother? Yeah. Is it his brother? Is it her brother? And so suddenly it's complicated. It's not that it's not doable. It's complicated. Yeah. And that's why having someone who is 100% confident in herself, because she cannot be anything else. Because the second you're weak, the vampires get you. The second you're weak, you end up married to some slob from wherever. The second you say no, you have to say no, you have to know your own mind because everyone's trying to take you. And so writing that first story about just this very lonely, very proud princess where she is a Black American princess, period, end of sentence. This is how she is against the supernatural. Just was so much fun that it was a great introduction to this world. And so my big plan, and we'll see, how much plans actually work, is to come out with the next book in 6 months and just start doing it in a serial and have it, a regular thing, because that way I didn't have to have a big door stopper of a book. I could divide it into little pieces, and it was so much more fun to do. And like just visiting with this character that I had made, and just giving her time, and interestingly making it into a fairy tale made the story work. Where she's in the deep dark woods where strange things happen.
Yeah.
And in the deep dark woods, and you have the Edgar Allan Poe, and you have all the different things, but you have the Grimm's fairy tale, and how the grim dark world that sometimes it is just be the Black experience, where like the reason why my family didn't watch horror is mom said, walk outside. Why are you watching horror? And I'm like, okay. It's just like really hard to have a comeback.
Mom definitely hit the nail on the head on that one. Yeah.
But you write about fantasy. And fantasy gives you like, why was Sweeney Todd hilarious? Like the fact that they timed opening the door where the body chute falls and the neck breaks is in the break, and you're like, this should not be funny, but it is.
Yeah, it's
like freaking hilarious. This is funny, and like writing it as a dark fantasy made it fun, and writing it spicy made it fun, as opposed to like having a little bit of darkness and then like not going the distance. I liked Sabriel and other stories because they actually say these things won't care that you're a child.
Yeah.
These things don't care that you're a girl or that you're a good person.
Yeah.
Does not care, will eat you because all it sees is meat. And that there's a difference between a predator, like a wolf is. I wrote this whole thing, like I read all this backstory of how a werewolf views humanity, and how in another book you're going to have like the girls who get turned into werewolves having to kind of reconcile the fact that they are no longer human, and that skin color is like the colors of feathers on chicken. Like you're going to eat the chicken whether it's got white feathers, brown feathers, black feathers, it's still chicken because you're thinking about the meat underneath.
Yeah.
And that the wolves, to kind of help their newbies get over it, skin all the bodies and remove all of the sex organs, and hands and feet and head, so that there's just bodies. So they're just like, so that's like her introduction is this room full, and she's like, someone worked very hard to say that this is just meat. And so the way she gets over the horror of that moment is trying to think of the tools that they used to perfectly skin a body, as opposed to like the fact that she's in a room full of skin bodies.
Yeah, so basically it becomes they turn it into a clinical procedure in order to not put too much thought onto it. Yeah. That is
Hannibal Lecter, but that's how I reconciled with the fact
clinical, not culinary. There's
still eating them though.
You're like, we're gonna roast this one at 350 with a rosemary butter because I'll tell you what. And then we're going to combine it with a red wine because if you do it with a white, it just comes off as gauche.
Oh, no, they absolutely do that. Like, she later on is like, why are we eating this delicious food on cafeteria plateware? Why don't we just make bone china? We have enough bones in the boneyard. Let's just grind it up into bone china.
That is recycling, though. That's just.
I mean, it's just there. I mean, and so I went down the rabbit hole and actually researched what it takes to make bone china. It's disgusting. Like, it's disgusting.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But it made sense. I was like, why wouldn't werewolves be eating food on bone china? They got it. Why would you bother with ceramic when
you're just sitting there going, even my werewolf characters might think that this is a gross process, and that's when you have to consider that for generations this stuff was like lauded as amazing, and you're just like, ew.
But they're werewolf princesses. Like in that particular book, they're all princesses. And
very cool.
They're all just going, well, yeah, we're princesses, so princesses should be eating with china. And, the silverware is going to have to be made out of gold and brass and stuff, not silver. But, easier to polish because silver is a real pain in the neck to actually sit down and polish. And so, like, learning about plateware, learning about what's got lead in it and how much, like, I read, oh my God, I did so much research.
I was gonna say this sounds like Blade has been going down quite a few rabbit holes when it comes to the research.
But it's because if you get that one random delicious fact, you can build a whole story on it.
Completely. Completely.
And like some of the things, actually, like TikTok has helped me a lot. Where I was like, okay, well, if you're a black woman and every time you turn, your hair grows 1 to 3 inches each time, how are you styling your hair? And that was actually the first time I went viral, like a year before the other one,
Ooh.
because I had like 11,000 people respond to me, and or like 1,000 or however many. Anyway, the point was, I was like, would it be locks, free flowing, twists, braids? Concerning how your hair grows, are you shaving it every single time, and do you want to deal with that? Because there'll just be hair everywhere. So then
Wow.
the culture of black women's hair
Uh-huh.
and how it relates to werewolves was one of the first hurdles I had to actually actively consider.
Can you tell us how you resolved that? Because I'm flabbergasted by the thought.
Okay, so I got a lot of responses, and it really helped. I actually got this one woman who was like, as an elder wolf, I would have my hair free flowing. And I was like, whoa. And that was like this awesome moment. That was like the very first mention I ever got. But what I decided was that they have a certain braid pattern because it actually helps the skin of the scalp grow back if they're ever clawed. So it catches the claws if they're fighting, and how fast the scalp will split if you don't have things weaving it together. So you have different braid patterns that everyone has, and or you have an afro or you have it free flowing, because that gives you just a little bit, you feel the air like some asshole's trying to touch your hair the same way you're already dodging. Your hair is free flowing, you feel a hand coming towards you, you move out of the way. So having it short is only for people who are new because they don't know how to maintain their body. And then the locks have to be made with a certain, everything has to be organic, like beeswax, honey. They have to make their own hair products, and also wigs. Wigs are a difficult thing because they cannot wear wigs with human hair, because then you'll smell like you're wearing humans. And so you have,
it'll be easier to detect somebody because you're already keened on sniffing out humans as it is. So yeah, okay, cool.
But also when you turn, every time you turn, you're going to have to deal with this extra stuff, right? So then you have to think about, is it going to be synthetic? Is it going to be like, how are you turning? So then I had to think about, all right, how are they turning? So I decided that there's magic involved. Like, they have a relationship with the witch, and so the witch protects them from other people who want to chop them up and use them into ingredients and various things. And they protect the witch from witch finders. And so it's a symbiotic relationship, and so that they can all live in the same place. And she takes all of the extra hair and the blood and skin and so forth as a skin witch and uses it to make her spell to make this protective barrier. And so that's where the extra hair goes. But the elder wolves don't need to turn. They have more controlled turns. But a clothed turn means that you can turn with your clothes still on, so that you can go from wolf to human and you're fully clothed, because she has braided her magic into your skin, because she's a skin witch, because she's a blood witch. And that's why you do the sacrifice.
Very cool.
So
there is kind of a symbiotic relationship with the other mystical individual, supernatural / mystical individuals in the. Very cool.
Yeah, so that was how I figured it out. But braiding, it's like the whole culture of hair care and black excellence being various types, where like who knows how to straighten their hair versus who knows how to braid versus who knows how to do locks, who knows how to maintain a fro. All of those are very different people. Whereas like Jenna's family does not braid hair. They don't sit down on Sunday morning or Saturday watching cartoons and braid. Like, that is not her culture. She looks like Aaliyah. She's got the long, beautiful, free-flowing, like, she's got way more curves than Aaliyah does. But, her personal style is based upon Aaliyah purposely, because Aaliyah looks very soft and gentle and beautiful and kind of like, a little risque, but not too risque. And so that's her look, is this soft, long, luxurious black hair. I mean, also, because I had a huge crush on Leah, and we're just not going to talk about that. We're just going
to... No. Same on that one. Yeah, no. I got you on that one. Completely.
Yeah, and so, like, Queen of the Damned aside, even if you watch Romeo Must Die, like it was very strange to watch her with Jet Li.
No, I think Queen of the Damned was a moment for a lot of people. I remember that coming out when I was in high school, and a lot of friends and I seeing that movie and going, the movie was okay, but did you see Aaliyah? Yes, we did. She was about 40 feet tall, and all of us had a realization about ourselves.
Man, her torso, the way she's moving her torso, and you're like,
oh my
and she
God.
died. It's her brother. And then I found out that half of those scenes were her brother, not her, because she died halfway through the shooting. And so just like,
and you're just like, that
so
makes
confusing.
me wonder things.
Just like, and then like, I watched that movie again recently. It is totally incoherent. Like,
completely.
She needed to be.
She needed to be that character in a better film. Like, the worst part is I remember the book. I remember the book because, like I said, I read all of the Anne Rice series, and I remember the book. And when they announced that she was going to play the part, I was like, "Oh my God, this is going to be amazing!" And then the movie came out, and you're like, "Oh, they completely murdered that." Okay.
And then they were like, "It's not our fault. She died." And they're like, "Oh, well, okay, fine." But that was like how I felt for Lost World. I was obsessed with Jurassic Park.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so I wasn't allowed to watch scary things. Mm-hmm. And I was determined to watch Jurassic Park. So my parents said, okay, you have to watch every Godzilla and monster movie pre-1950. Like, you have to earn your way to Godzilla. And I was like, challenge accepted. And Mom really didn't understand. Like where did I find my love of monsters? Was that I watched monster movies. I watched the crazy ones about the giant locusts, and the way they killed the locusts was we dropped them in the ocean, but it's really just a bucket of water with a bunch of grasshoppers drowning, and they filmed it, and they shook it a bunch to make it look like the ocean.
Oh my God. Oh my God. And I think what I love the most now is that sometimes you'll get movies that do stuff like that, will take that level of effects and still utilize like the techniques that were used in the 50s because they didn't have the technology, but now they just do it for the sake of doing it like that, which is always beautiful.
I mean, it's better than just like copping out and doing CG where you just don't care. You're like, CG. So the stakes are really low. Whereas if it's prosthetic makeup, like, why is the original? Did you know that the original Jurassic Park, the animatronic T-Rex actively hurt people, and they thought it was haunted?
Yes. Well, I'm sorry, but Spielberg should have known after the Jaws thing. You make Jaws and you have the issues that you had with the shark in Jaws, and then he's like, you know what? We're gonna bring Rick Baker back. We're going to bring Rick Baker back to do the dinosaurs
in Jurassic Park. I don't know about the Jaws things. Tell me.
Oh my God. He had so many problems. Jaws was an animatronic. Right. The whole shark was an animatronic. And it was built so that it could submerge and it would come up and they could basically do everything. They had so many problems with the animatronic. It would sink randomly. It would emerge randomly. It clamped down on Richard Dreyfuss at one point. Like, they had all of these problems, and it was done by Rick Baker. And then fast forward to Spielberg doing, well, and he carried Rick Baker through everything else he ever did. So, like, he did E.T. and he did Hook and he did everything else. But the thing that he brought him back for Jurassic Park, and everybody's like, okay, you brought him back for Jurassic Park, cool. And then they're like, we're going to build a life-size T-Rex, and everybody's like, cool, you're going to build a life-size T-Rex. And then they're like, you have a life-size T-Rex is bitten people, and you're like, he should have known from when he did Jaws, but he didn't learn anything. They're just doing the exact same thing again.
It's the guy who got caught in the center and it started thrashing, and he just talked into a ball, and I was just like, you know, because I just thought the thing about when I finally watched Jurassic Park, not only was it just so satisfying because I proved my mother wrong that I wasn't a coward, because she was just like so sure that I'd be afraid. I was like, I am going to watch Jurassic Park. I will watch every Godzilla movie, and I don't care. I'm like, even though some of them, you know, I was like watching where it was just like my eyes just like behind the TV.
I'm good.
And I'm good. You know, I mean, no, not with the shirt. behind the couch because you need running room. Also with siblings, so that if I needed to throw my sister or my brother at just whoop, old perks of being the oldest, and like my siblings know that I will like stand away from her because she will just throw you and be gone. Wait for me. Nope, you better keep up. But anyway, watched it, and I was just like, middle of the day, and you're terrified. And you're like, when she's like, where's the goat? You're like, where is the goat? What happened? Where's the goat? And the velociraptor's opening the door. You're just like, no, get the freak out. You stupid. Like, I just thought, why? I mean, I'll go back and watch that one. Like, I'll go back and watch a couple of movies that I think are like perfection. Like Jurassic Park, The Matrix. I don't care what people say. The first Matrix, I still love. I still love it.
Absolutely.
And people were like, I didn't get it. I was like, that's fine. It's not for you. Like, I watched that, The Mummy, and which, like, all the Bipanic. Like, I wanted to be Brendan Fraser, and I wanted Brendan
You are
Fraser.
so right now in this moment in the right place, because anybody on here who's on my Discord and or on any of my TikTok lives will know the conversation we keep having about the original Mummy movie and how that awoke a lot of people, whether it be because of Brendan Fraser or Rachel Weisz or who played
I know
who I'm talking about.
I just wrote his name down. What the heck is wrong with me? I mean, I was never into Imhotep. It was just not my thing. But everybody else, not the brother, because I have an annoying brother.
No, Nige was he was annoying. He grated too much.
But then he owned in Sparta. Him and Lucy Lawless.
That is
he
true.
Plays just this diabolical, awful guy.
That is true. Like, he did a really good job in Sparta. He was, Lucy Lawless in that show. Oh
Lucy Lawless did a lot of things. I mean, I couldn't get past the bangs in Xena. Like, it was like, remember when everybody had, like, the same way I wanted to, and this is going to cause a lot of people to get upset, but I loathe Sarah Michelle Gellar, like, with a fiery passion. She was like everybody I went to school with, so they're like, Buffy, you're a danger. I don't want to. I was like, fucking die! Because it was just like, everybody I went to school with had her hair, wore her clothes, did everything. So I couldn't watch Buffy because I was already going to school with these turds. Why the heck would I be wasting my given time watching? And like,
you're like, no. I live this life, but there's a lot less monsters, which makes the whole thing boring.
Right. And also, like, it was not an angel. They're like, everybody loves it. I was like, no, I go to school with the stupid place. Like, if there were vampires, if we were on a Hellmouth, I would not be surprised. Like, let's have it right in the middle of the school. Like, my school, my town is so ridiculous and so about image that there were kids that died in the driveway in front of the mansions because the parents didn't want the neighbors to see an ambulance showing up at the house. That was the kind of town I lived in. It was surreal. And so, like, when you have the, like, everyone's like, yeah, Buffy's doing all this, that. I was like, I literally just walked down the street to a place that looks just like them. Where the frick are the vampires? Can you eat one of these people? Can we have some mysterious death? Instead of, like, oh, she took a designer drug because her uncle was trying to feel young again and shared what he had. And you're like, that's not so fun. That's the opposite of fun.
And it's all living in a world where it's all about optics as opposed to actual human depth. Yeah,
which is why I'm writing what I would like to happen.
Exactly,
and
right?
I regret nothing.
So listen, I hate to do this.
No, I realized that, like, we never actually got any questions. That didn't actually happen, and it is probably...
It's okay, because you know what? You're going to go back to your TikTok and find out that you have a lot of new friends who are probably going to end up sending you questions when it comes to random stuff. But I wanted to take a moment and thank you for your time, and gracing us with all of this. And your energy is infectious, and everything sounds so fantastic about these books. You need to make sure to keep us all updated. I'm going to be putting the video out on YouTube. I'll send you a copy like I talked to you about before, so that you can put it on whatever spaces you have for that. and we're going to get some links going, and we're going to make sure that we got the support for you so that we get those editing fees taken care of, and we're going to do the best that we can because we all want to read this book now, Blade. We all want it.
It's coming out on Halloween. Hell or High Water, it is coming out this Halloween. It's coming out on Halloween. That is the one thing.
Halloween release. I love everything about this. This works. So, again, the title of the book is Nightskins: Tall Tales of a Black American Princess, and your pen name is K.D. Blade, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
somebody
BladetheXolo didn't make any sense. Well, pen name, it didn't make sense to have BladetheXolo as a pen name because it didn't. So it's K as in kangaroo, D as in dog, Blade. Not so that way. But yes, Halloween. It's coming out. Please be kind. I hope people like it. There'll be most likely there'll be a cover reveal like tomorrow or this week to be like, this is what the book looks like. Or there'll be a cover reveal when the pre-order finally gets its act together. Because by God, it's going to happen. Technical details, by God. Anyway, thank you again.
She's like, I never thought the writing of the book would be the easiest part.
Yeah, it's just like you can't beat an algorithm to death, but you want to.
Listen, listen, it's too late. You've made a whole bunch of new friends tonight. We're gonna keep it going. We're gonna keep it nice and loud and strong about it. Because if I don't read this book, if I don't get this book read by the second week in November, I'm gonna be pissed off. I'm just putting that out there right now.
I mean, I hope you like it. I think you're gonna like it, but
I'm looking. You already know I'm looking forward to it. How many times have I bugged you about taking up your time in order to try to promote this? I was like, I need to help you make this happen so that I can have it in my hands.
Well, you were top of the list for as far as the audiobook side goes. I was thinking about having you be like one of the male characters. One of the male characters. Like that's the thing that I have to shop around. Where I realized when I was like getting way ahead of myself. I was like, get the fucking book, then worry about the audiobook. All of that is a bunch of bullshit if you don't actually have the real thing. So
that's what you do. You just write it on the legal pad. You push over to the side. You're like, I'll just come back to this when I need to. These are my ideas for who's going to narrate the audiobook. Push it back over there.
And then people are like, you need to do it. And I was like, but I can't talk like a guy. They're like, but you're good at storytelling. And I was like, yeah.
I mean, and when it comes to stuff like that, I mean, yeah, reach out to the right people. I have a whole mess of friends on here who do VA work beyond me. So, I mean, we would definitely be able to help out as best we can. So just always keep me in mind. Never be afraid to drop me a direct line, okay?
You're kind of hard to forget, so don't worry. Don't worry about it.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but we'll find out. All right. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
And have a fantastic night, everybody.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Bye, guys.
Bye.